Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. So let's get just hop into this. I'm very honored to have with me today Ejike Okpa, who's just, to me, he's a guy who just really has a pulse on what's happening in the U.S. and around the world. I always love his commentary. So, thanks for being with us today, Ejike.
Thank you, Dan.
So let's just, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is just, I want to give you a minute to explain to the world as best you can. Like, okay, I'm gonna be as blunt as possible. Is Donald Trump crazy, or does he have a master plan? Let's just go with that question and see what you can come up with.
You know, hey, thank you. Happy New Year. It's one of those when I took school start in Nigeria, they give you multiple choices. They said all of the above listed below. Okay. So, so yes, in today's world, you have to be crazy, and at the same time, that craziness should come with a master plan. So yes, we want a president that is crazy, and then also, anchor it on a master plan in order to straighten things up.
Well, so let's just take it. Listen, you're in Texas. You know a lot about the oil industry, and so let's just talk about the Venezuela. Do you think? Listen, I was not a Maduro fan. I do believe that there's an importance of restoring what I call freedom and democracy in Venezuela, and bringing greater, doing away with authoritarianism there. I think it's a bellwether country in South America. But what do you make of the president's statements about taking over the oil, or asking American companies to invest? And I want to add the caveat there that the CEO of ExxonMobil apparently didn't like what Trump was saying, and so now he's being ostracized by the president in some ways. But what do you think overall about what happened in Venezuela and the future of Venezuela?
Well, it's very unfortunate because, Venezuela is part of, the Western Hemisphere. And at some point, Venezuela was the richest country in South America, given their per capita income. And of course, we have Hugo Chavez, who went over there and ran amok and, instilled this behavior of we're going to do what we want, however we want it, and we're going to be pimp. The word pimp, P-I-M-P, which is more like put in my pocket president, and then bring anybody along that culture, and see this country that was once a shining example of what democracy can do for a country became one of the examples of what democracy shouldn't be. And so with that, a lot of Venezuelans fled and went to other countries and started clamoring for the removal of Maduro. Maduro was given an opportunity, to get it right or get out, and he chose to stay in there. And then what happened to him? What happened to him? The ExxonMobil people, oil companies have always been the most invested oil company in that country since oil was discovered in 1922. All these other, China, Russia, and whomever else showing up, to show up. Um, have don't have significant investment, and it's American technology that also has kept that company pumping as much as they could. Yes, Venezuela has the largest reserve in the world, but you look at their production capacity, at the top of their game, they were 3 million barrels a day, and they went down to like 1 million barrel a day. When people beat their chest, just like Nigeria have reserve, the point in economics is not what is in the ground, it's what you are producing, because that's what people are buying. It's on a barrel per day, not barrel per reserve. And so that is a significant difference that people need to understand. Saying, oh, it's all about the oil. The 1 million barrels is selling to the rest of the world and themselves. America needs about 14 million barrels a day. So, 1 million, Venezuela is not selling all of their oil to America. They're giving a lot of it cheap to Cuba, because of whatever agreement they made, and then they sell it to whomever else. So at the end of the day, not much of Venezuelan oil was coming to America. If we were going to look at how many barrels are coming to America, regardless of the 300 billion, reserve they have. So, ExxonMobil guy could say whatever ExxonMobil guy said. You remember when Rex Tillerson, was CEO of ExxonMobil in the first Trump administration. He didn't last because he didn't understand the politics beyond just looking, sticking a pipe in the ground and sucking oil. The politics is different from that.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And I think it's a very, excuse me, a very important point that you bring out is that yes, it does have one of the largest or the largest oil reserves, but it's what they pump out of the ground. It's what they can
Yeah,
produce. I would argue, and I've said before that I think that strategically what Trump is trying to do in Venezuela is a lot of the oil that was being produced there was being sold illegally to the Russians or to China. Venezuela was honestly one of the largest partners to China in the world. And so some people argue, I hope the president's thinking this way. They're arguing that, hey, we may not be able to control China around the world, but let's control them in our backyard and kick them out of Venezuela. So if that's part of the equation, then I support that. But the reality is that I see the President Trump, very interested in controlling natural resources around the world. And I think that I'd love your thoughts on this. Is that he was said, okay, we'll get the country that has the reserves, and then we'll entice American companies to come in there and try to produce that production, which is not as easy as just going in there, as and just putting in new equipment and just making it happen. There are a lot of other issues that have to happen there. So let's talk about China's influence in Venezuela and in the hemisphere. I mean, do you think that part of Trump's calculation is that, hey, we need to keep China out of our backyard? I mean, do you think that that's something he's thinking?
well, I mean, look, love is proximity. The nearer, the better. So you want to keep those who you love closer to you. China is too far from the Western Hemisphere, but China, is this toothless bulldog in the world that is barking. When it comes to it, it doesn't bite. Remember at the time when Nancy Pelosi said she was going to Taiwan, and China said, hey, if you show up here, we're gonna, you know, shoot down the airplane and blah blah blah. And Nancy went, and China didn't do anything. If China is that sophisticated in protecting its own interest, what America did was intelligence. There was a lot of planning in this. It didn't. The president didn't wake up one day and say, "We're going over there," and no, they planned it for months. I don't know how long it took, but they planned it. How come China delegation that was in Venezuela 6 hours before this happened, didn't see this coming and have their own military resources, there to at least defend the guy or offer the guy an escape route so that he shouldn't have or wouldn't have been arrested, we're going from a presidential palace to a prison, yard in New York. So when people are talking about China, I said, how come China didn't know about this? Or if they knew it, how come they didn't do something? So yes, I support the president, go around and protect what you can protect. And sometimes that protection comes because, in the world of animal farms, every animal is created equal, but some animals are more equal than others by design and default. So America by design, yes, and by default too, because they got in there and they did what they did. Russia wouldn't have, remember the history in the 60s when Russia tried to do it with Cuba, that Bay of Pigs something and how it ended. And today it left Cuba a wounded lion that is just dead, lame and lousy, and so Trump has brought in a new way of looking at the world geopolitical play. Where do we go? What is American interest? Every country should have an interest. And when you have that interest, you should also back it with might and not just talk.
Yeah, listen, I would just rather, I wish that the president would, personal preferences that he would talk more about the importance of, the importance of protecting freedom and democracy. But putting that aside for a second, let's just continue this talk. Let's talk about natural resources. Let's talk about oil. I mean, as we know, he made an agreement with Ukraine on their natural resources. I would argue that he's kind of violating that agreement, but that's a different story. You look at what he's done in Venezuela about taking control of the oil, and then let's take two other countries, now one of your homeland of Nigeria, and then Iran, and let's talk about, I know that Trump has been making a big issue out of the so-called persecution of Christians in Nigeria, but I think I would argue that I think that that's kind of a precursor to get more control of Nigerians' oil, and then in Venezuela, not Venezuela, and then Iran, where he's talking about helping the protesters there in Iran. I would also argue that that's a plan to get greater control of the oil there. I mean, do you think that Trump is driven by controlling natural resources around the world, or do you think that there is, once again, we talk about a plan? Is there a plan about his potential involvement in Nigeria and his potential involvement in Iran, or what is that motivation?
It's sort of difficult to go and read what is anybody. There's always an ulterior motive. I think the president is trying to do the best he can for these countries that have fragile leadership. In the case of Nigeria, I was hoping that in since 1999 they have democracy, which is what 26 years. You know, how is Nigeria doing? People talk about Nigerian crude and Nigerian days and the sweet bunny, but even if they have the sweet oil, it has given Nigerians sour taste. Sour taste in the sense that the average Nigerian is still suffering. Average Nigerian don't know if they go to work and they're going to get paid. The same thing in Iran. You have the few that have hijacked the political system, and that hijack has led them controlling the national resources to benefit a handful of them. If you take care of your home, no matter how small it is, it's going to be difficult for an outsider to plan to come in and invade you and displace you, because your own people will fight for you. So you see the Iranians, if somebody notices that your house is falling apart, your neighbor could be on the side, go for it. And that's what the Iranians are doing, and that's what Nigerians are doing. Whether they're using to come into Nigeria because is the genocide. Genocide has been in Nigeria since I was even there. They used to be my Tasine kind of group. That they have morphed into all kinds of names, into ISIS. ISIS, and then it's going to be Boko Haram. They all changed name. The fact is that the Christians and the Muslims in Nigeria have had this love-hate relationship, and they have killed each other. Doing it, and Nigerian government has never rose to a national level to say, we're going to pass, hatred law. If you kill somebody because of their tribal identity or because of their religious identity, we're going to prosecute you with the federal law. They haven't done it. Nigeria don't have prosecution of crime based on the fact that I don't like you because you're Christian, I'm going to kill you. I don't like you because you're Muslim, I'm going to kill you. So again, it is a default part of the Nigerian leadership behavior. Because even when the airstrike happened in Nigeria, Tinubu didn't come to the national TV and say, "Hey guys, I knew about this. I approved it. I didn't approve it." He did it. There was a processed information statement that was issued on behalf of it. And shortly after that, where did Homeboy go? Homeboy went to France, and Homeboy left to Nigeria, and he wasn't even in Nigeria on Christmas Day. I mean, Christmas Day as well as New Year. So again, the same thing you could see. Anytime you have a delinquent behavior in your country, you are going to create a desire of somebody outside of your country to want to step in. The same thing that is going on with the Palestinian issues, where Iran said, hey, we come help you. But you are helping somebody when at the same time your own house is falling apart. The Iranian government haven't focused on what Iranians want. Instead, they want to throw their power around because they're selling some commodity and getting some money, and they said, hey, we're going to be on the world stage and do what they do. I think, of all the 200 and something countries in the world, the most important thing to protect your sovereignty is to act responsibly and responsively. So if Trump sees those weaknesses and he said, I'm going to step into it, more grease to his elbow. Maybe those people cannot say, hey, back up, don't come here, we're going to take care of it. But they haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I would argue that once again, it goes back to what I said with my earlier guess, is that Trump is a very transactional president. I mean, listen, if you see he was in real estate, and if you see that a big building is being auctioned off just because they didn't pay their taxes on it, he's going to go in there and scoop in and take it. It's not whether or not it's good for the investors or not. He's an opportunist, and so from that standpoint, I see it, and that's why I think Nigeria is an opportunity for him when it comes to natural resources. And Iran, listen, once again, I'm not a supporter of the Iranian administration by any stretch of the imagination, and I think that there needs to be freedom and democracy there. So I think my prediction there is that I think that Khomeini will probably be assassinated by actually the Israelis over the next week. But listen, we have like 30 seconds here. So where do you think, what do you think Trump is going to do next? I mean, from a global standpoint, where do you think we'll see his next play?
It's hard to say, but what he's doing has sent message, you know, um, to many people in the world, and even in Nigeria, people are calling me and saying, hey, what Trump has done in Venezuela or even did with the airstrike in Nigeria has made a lot of people now, running and hiding. That even Christmas time, the kidnapping thing, wasn't much feared in the East, where that was going on, because everybody said, if he can go in and pick up Maduro, he might as well come in and pick, Gumi or the Sultan of Sokoto or even, anybody in there, because they really don't have anything to protect themselves. If they could come into Nigeria, and Nigerian Air Force didn't even see that plane flying, what does it tell you about the nature of the defense system? Because, the airspace of over every country belongs to them. If it is penetrable, somebody can come in and do something to you. Then you go back to your table and say, geez, what are we missing here? What happened here? So Trump, again, he sent the signal the way he has sent it. Just like when the reason China became a default partner in Africa is because Obama was quiet about, China. Obama discouraged the U.S. Exim Bank from doing any major stuff, and China saw that as an opening, and they came in and started lending all these choking loans to Africa. So every president, everybody's going to exploit them. There's something they say in my tribal language, Igbo, "Onye fonyo ye tibu ogagubia." When you see somebody you're going to beat up, you want to get into a fight. Okay, and that's what this is. I see I can beat you up, and I will say, bring it on. But in Texas, we say, don't mess with us because we're gonna stand up and fight. Okay? So that's
Yeah.
how this is. It's not very complicated. I think it's responsibility and being responsive to your own people first. Because if the Venezuelans felt that Maduro was being responsible to them and responsible, they would have been out there fighting for him. Somebody knew about this happening. Maybe some people in the cabinet, but they didn't tell him, and they picked him up. He picked him and his wife. Then just think about it. You sleeping in the comfort of your bed one day, the next way you're sleeping on a hard bed, a mattress in a prison. You're gonna say, "How did I get here?"
No, no, I agree with you. Listen, one thing, if nothing else, I mean, the American military is amazing. They show that no one is safe, as you're talking about. No one is safe. I mean, Venezuela is a country where their defenses were supported by the Russians, and you had Cuban guards there because they didn't trust the Venezuelan guards, and so no, America has proven that we can take anybody we want whenever we are. Now, whether that's right or not, that's a different conversation for a different day. Listen, sadly, we're out of time as always. It's always great talking to you, GK, and go Texas. One of these days I'm going to get down there and visit you. But thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. There's America and there's Texas, and I love it over here in Texas.
Don't mess with Texas.
Don't
Anyway, thanks
mess
for
with
being with Dane Waters and Around the World with Dane Waters. It's always a great pleasure, and I look forward to talking to you guys again next week. Thanks a lot.
Isn't the Nevertron? I'll break it down into a couple